I will first start sharing my presentation. Um, that is okay. Uh, so, so thank you very much for giving me the word, and thanks everybody who is still engaging with the speakers and who bear through the day. I assume that you had to absorb a lot of information that are extremely useful. And while the previous session was more focusing on your soft skills or developing of your soft skills and your business acumen, in my session we will go to hardcore regulation. That is not a very popular thing in the blockchain industry, but on the other hand, it is kind of necessary to facilitate the operation of your businesses. So my name is Ivona Skultachiova, and I am a senior researcher and project manager at European Crowdfunding Network. My primary background is I'm a lawyer. I was in academia for quite some time, but I was also very entrepreneurial, and I have background also in entrepreneurial finance. I am a startup mentor and advisor for past 4 years. I sit on a board of a blockchain company, and I have also my own company. So I think I have several unique perspectives with which I can approach regulation. And I think it was said also in the previous session that keeping common sense is an important skill. And that approach I try to apply when dealing with startups and when dealing with regulation as well. So let's go to it. Today we will talk predominantly about MiCA regulation proposal, which is, I think, personally, a major step towards legitimizing crypto asset markets and crypto asset service providers, and so on. But first, I would like to give you a little bit of background to crypto assets as such and how it came to this stage that we are really talking about hardcore regulation that will, if enacted, will be applicable in the whole European Union in a harmonized way. So across the board, everywhere the same. So the evolution of crypto assets, well, it all started in 2009 when the first Bitcoin was appeared or Bitcoin emerged. And originally, of course, it was supposed to be an alternative, digital alternative to centralized currencies issued by the government. And of course, it introduced the blockchain technology as such. I would argue that these days Bitcoin is used for slightly different purpose than it was originally planned, but is still one of the major players in the crypto asset field, if not the most popular one. Then, as we fast forward to 2013, we could observe first ICO or initial coin offering. So particularly new way of raising funding through crypto assets. Maybe if Mastercoin doesn't really tell you anything, it was later renamed to Omni protocol layer. So it was a project similar to what later Ethereum effectively achieved. So it was the first, effectively first ICO, didn't raise too much money, but it was inception of the boom that happened later on. In 2014, we've seen a first stablecoin, Tether, that is actually still let's say, the most popular stablecoin out there, even though it went through some challenges and scandals and so on. And in the same year, also the Ethereum was born, which of course facilitated a lot of decentralized applications and is still one of the major players in the industry. Specifically for ICOs that followed, Ethereum developed standardized token protocol, standardized token ERC20, which the companies could readily use as a template and in that way deploy their own ICOs. And it became very easy to launch an initial coin offering or initial token offering, whatever you want to call it, So around 2017, we've really experienced a huge boom of different so-called altcoins that at some point, it was, I don't know, 100 altcoins per day that emerged out of the blue. And that really further developed the crypto asset markets, because these altcoins, besides being issued, they could be also on many occasions readily traded in at crypto exchanges. In 2019, bigger players stepped into the game and Libra was announced. Libra is sort of a stable coin, which should be in the future deployed by one of the tech giants, Facebook. And that is when the whole crypto asset market became real also for the regulators, very real. Not that they were ignoring it before, but they were still sort of, most of them were engaging into wait and see approach. Let's see how this market grows, whether it is something significant or whether it will die by its own hand. Later on, it became clear when Libra was announced that this is possibly something big. And the regulators really accelerated their work on potential regulation. And in 2020, in September, and at the end of September, MiCA was announced. So you can see that it took 11 years to introduce some major regulation in Europe. But it also made sense because, as I said, regulators step in only in case they have a feeling that they need to fix something, or we call it, they need to fix a market failure, or they really have other very important public interests that they want to promote, such as promotion of innovation. And that also plays a role in this regulation. So when it comes to crypto asset regulation, I will not speak about the whole world, but maybe just for comparison, I took two biggest jurisdictions that we often look at, and that's US. And in the US, the overall approach to crypto assets is very cautious. They have very strong financial regulation that they are very proud of. So when these crypto assets emerged, they were very, very suspicious and were rather not so favorable towards crypto assets. SEC, as you can see in the excerpt from the article, is American financial watchdog who has enforced a lot of cases against crypto-related firms, whether they were the firms that launched ICOs or firms that operated crypto exchanges or crypto custodians. So there was a lot of enforcement action, and many of those companies were shut down. To be fair to them, they really tried to pinpoint the fraud cases or pinpoint the cases where obviously the customers of these companies were in danger. But that sort of determined their initial approach to crypto assets. On the other side of the pond, in Europe, the approach was slightly different. So we've seen some sort of warnings from the regulators about potential risk, either in ICO or generally in dealing or in handling of crypto assets of different kind. But on the other hand, there was no massive action against crypto assets, and individual states deployed their own strategies. For instance, I can give an example of Malta, who enacted quite extensive regulation of crypto assets and also crypto asset service providers in 2018. And there were other countries like France or Luxembourg or Gibraltar or Liechtenstein or others who try to attract businesses, crypto businesses, by their attempt for regulation. So that's in short how the approaches were different. So I think when MiCA comes, when MiCA will be enacted and enforced finally in the future, The first good point would be that there will be no divergent regulations in the EU, and there will be one regulation for all, not for all crypto assets, but crypto assets that are in the scope of that regulation. So what are crypto assets? And I'm, of course, assuming that you have experience with the blockchain and that you know what are crypto assets. But what I wanted to stress is that we need to look at crypto assets as format or form of an asset rather than a content of an asset. What do I mean by that? Crypto assets is everything that is a digital representation of certain economic values stored and transferred through means of a distributed ledger technology or similar technology. So maybe you are wondering why I do have the pictures of two trash bags on in my presentation. And that's because I want to make a certain analogy. So in the pictures, you see two trash bags that seem kind of similar. They're different color, but they seem to serve the same purpose. And there are no significant differences between them. However, from legal perspective, these two trash bags are very different. The black trash bag is just a regular trash bag that you can buy in the store, whereas the blue trash bag is a trash bag that is issued by a certain municipality in Switzerland, and it is much more expensive than the black one because it contains in itself the right of the bearer of this bag for the trash to be taken away by a trash man. So it is a way how you pay your trash taxes to the municipality, and that's why the bag is more expensive. Furthermore, the trash man will not take your trash unless it is packed in this bag, because that, again, that can allude to the fact that you paid your trash taxes. So you see, they look similar. They serve at first glance, they serve the similar purposes, but they actually are bearer of very different legal rights, or rights in general. And that's the same with crypto assets. We really need to look into what rights are attached to them, or obligations are attached to them, and what rights they bestow upon the holders of that asset. Only then I can, as a lawyer, tell you what type of asset that is and which regulation is applicable, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about tokens or crypto assets such, in the past, the discussion was usually conducted along three different categories of crypto assets. And those were utility tokens, security tokens, and payment tokens. Well, payment tokens, examples could be Bitcoin or Litecoin, where obviously these are used as medium of exchange or value exchanger, and they do not have other significant purposes or rights attached to them. Then there were utility tokens, which had actually a consumptive value. So for instance, you could gain access to some goods or services, or you can be rewarded on a certain blockchain platform, a certain app, for certain conduct that was desirable within that app. And so it was sort of like like native microcurrency within that platform, but only within that platform. The examples would be, for instance, basic attention token, very popular, one of the biggest market capitalizations on the market, or Filecoin, also is a decentralized storage, as well, very rather popular or rather known, let's put it that way. And then the third category, which is the dangerous one, which everybody wants to avoid, is security tokens, the tokens that would be qualified as financial instruments because they share some similarities with shares, bonds, derivatives, and others. So security tokens, regardless of their format, would most likely in every jurisdiction fall within financial regulation, and that is quite stringent, and that you have to comply with a lot of rules. Let's put it that way. So everybody tried to avoid being categorized as security token. Why is that so? Why we don't want our tokens to be security tokens? Well, Obviously, what I mentioned is that it relates to a very stringent regulation. And it was not always so clear whether all tokens are securities or just some tokens. And the debate goes along two like views on tokens. So first, you can look at how the token was actually designed. So if it was designed to have consumptive value, so pay for the services or reward somebody on the platform, that is consumptive value, and that is how the token was designed in the first place. However, what you can do with that token is also to go to cryptocurrency or crypto exchange or cryptocurrency exchange and capitalize on the fluctuating value of the token. And in that case, you are doing it from speculative perspective or with a speculative goal. And it has a similar effect as what you do with regular securities or regular financial instruments, where the financial gain of buying and selling is your main purpose of why you engage with these tokens in the first place. So that's why different lawyers had different opinions on whether all tokens are securities, because you can sell them on the crypto exchanges or not. And Mika does answer that question to some extent. So now I would like to speak a little bit about why it is actually good that the regulation comes. Because in the past, I spoke with many people in the blockchain industry, and they just thought that if it's unregulated, it's actually better because we don't have to comply with any rules, and maybe regulation would be more damaging to us. However, the truth is that there is very few things in the world that are completely unregulated. So in this case where we have a lot of stakeholders that engage in the system, I think it's better when we have some sort of certainty about what the legal position is, especially for the companies that either issue tokens or provide some services in the industry. So first reason why the regulation is good is for the purpose of legal certainty. If we know what are our obligations, and if we know that if we comply with those obligations, everything is fine, and there won't be anybody knocking on our door 2 years later after the offering with some sort of warrants or with some sort of fines and punishment and potential criminal liability, then I think that this is worth to consider the regulation. Of course, when the government and parliament issues certain or publishes or enacts certain regulation, it also means that they legitimize that particular industry. And it can make a lot of difference for reputational purposes. And I know that in previous sessions, somebody mentioned that there's a lot of negative reputation that blockchain industry got because of some cases of fraud or financial misconduct. So I think that increased reputation through regulation is something that could potentially help the industry. You can also develop some sort of initial trust with the customers because they know, again, that this technology and also these companies were legitimized by the government. And also some strategic partners like bigger corporates or financial institutions or research institutions are more likely to cooperate with you when the industry is legitimized through proper regulation. And one particular opportunity that Mika offers is the passporting option. Passporting option means that if you register yourself or if you comply with the regulation in one member state, you can offer your services or offer your tokens in any other member state across European Union, which is a market of 350 million people. So I think that is really interesting addition. So you expand your market and through just through complying once, which hasn't been the case until now. I'm not sure whether there was a question. Something was blinking on my screen. Is that so? I cannot see it anymore.
Oh, it just means
okay.
The participants.
Okay, so I will just continue. If there's anything urgent, please let me know. So, but let's go straight to MiCA, which is abbreviation for Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation. As I mentioned in the beginning, it is in a proposal stage, and it will go through quite extensive legislative procedures still. So there might be, to some extent, changes to it until it is enacted, or if it is enacted. So the good news is that if it is enacted, it will be effective as of 2024, or beginning 2024. So there is still a lot of time to prepare for it, and you don't have to start studying details of it by tomorrow. But I still think it is good to know what is coming, and it's maybe also good to still engage with the regulators through different channels if you think that there's something in the regulation that should be changed. So MiCA is a part of the digital finance package, and it focuses, in my view, mainly on so-called stable coins and enabling of crypto asset service providers, so-called CASPs. And it creates effectively very new type of asset class that is nothing like we've seen before. So it really says, okay, crypto assets, beside the ones that are securities, are something new, and that's why we need separate rules for it. However, if you really look into its content, it is heavily inspired by financial regulation with a little bit lighter touch. So it is definitely visible that there are a lot of problems that needs to be addressed in the financial markets that are very similar to the problems that need to be addressed in the crypto asset markets. And again, it legitimizes a lot of stakeholders in the industry, which I think is generally a good step. So let's go to the types of assets that MiCA introduces. And so according to MiCA, a crypto asset means a digital representation of value or rights, which may be transferred and stored electronically using distributed ledger technology or similar technology. Well, this is sort of a catch-all phrase or catch-all definition. So it means that it really catches everything from CryptoKitties to Libra, because it's so broad. So then the regulation goes on to distinguish between different types of crypto assets. So you have so-called asset reference tokens that are sort of stable coins. On next slide, I will go into concrete definition. Then you have e-money tokens that are also stable coins that are pegged to particular currency issued by government, either dollars, euros, and so on. And then you have a category which I call all the rest, or tokens that are not asset referenced and not e-money tokens. So you see specific category for one type of stable coin, specific category for another type of stable coin. And then you have all the rest, which are subsumed under sort of general regime of this regulation. Within the first two categories, they distinguish between significant asset referenced and e-money tokens and non-significant ones. And what does it mean, significant and non-significant? So significance is determined by checking the box of three of the following criteria, which is customer base is bigger than 2 million, market capitalization is bigger than 2 billion. There, in terms of transactions per day, you have 500,000 transactions or transactions worth 100 million. you have reserve assets of more than 1 billion and operational in at least 7 member states. So if you fall into that category of asset reference tokens or e-money tokens, you have very stringent regime. But obviously, this is not per se for startups. This is very much oriented towards bigger players who already have some customer base and developed business, who would like to step into to this crypto game. And in the case, there is a special regulatory regime which is much more strict than for the others. So let's go to the definitions. So the basic crypto asset definitions, besides the general one, are the ones of utility tokens, asset reference tokens, and electronic money tokens. So utility tokens are a subgroup of all the rest that I call. This type of crypto asset is intended to provide digital access to a good or service available on DLT and is only accepted by the issuer of that token. So as you see, that's standard utility token, as we described it also previously. And it is relatively easy to issue such token. I will show you on the next slide what are the really the requirements for that. Then we have asset reference tokens as a type of crypto asset that purports to maintain a stable value by referring to the value of several fiat currencies that are legal tender, one or several commodities, or one or several crypto assets, or a combination of such assets. So if we break it down, these are stable coins that are either backed by a basket of different fiat currencies, so different currencies issued by different governments, or commodities such as gold, silver, and so on, or other crypto assets, or the combination of these assets. So this also relatively broad category within stablecoins group. And the electronic money tokens are a type of crypto assets that main purpose of which is to be used as a means of exchange, and that purports to maintain a stable value by referring to the value of a fiat currency that is legal tender. So the difference between asset reference tokens and electronic money tokens is that electronic money tokens are pegged only to one fiat currency. So it is, let's imagine digital or crypto euro or crypto dollar or crypto yuan. So that's the main difference. When we look at examples, or again visualize what is within the reach of MiCA and what is outside of reach of MiCA, we see that, for instance, Libra is within reach of MiCA, either as the original concept of Libra was to be backed by several different assets, several different currencies. So original Libra would be a significant asset reference token, for instance. Then we have Tether Gold, which is relatively new. It's a tether that is backed by gold. That would be just a normal asset reference token. We have also e-money tokens. The new proposition for Libra, where Libra will be pegged to particular currencies, but only one currency, would be significant e-money token. Whereas, for instance, trust token called True USD or True Dollar would be doesn't reach the significance threshold, so would be just normal or standard e-money token. The players, the regular players in the crypto industry, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, fall a little bit outside of these major categories, but are still captured by the all-cash category of crypto assets, because they represent value that is stored or transferred through distributed ledger technology or similar technology. But they are subsumed only under the general sort of regime or the lightest regime included in MiCA. What lies outside of MiCA scope are security tokens, shares and bonds in a tokenized format, which will be still subsumed and regulated by financial regulation. It didn't change. And e-money, regular e-money that are not in crypto form. Those are money, digital money that you see on your bank account, or if you have this traveling card that you pay for public transport with, that you preload with money, and that is also something that could be considered as, or is categorized as e-money. So what do the crypto asset issuers actually need to do? Now we're going through the general procedure that applies to crypto asset issuers of the tokens that are not asset reference tokens and e-money tokens. So if you don't want to issue stable coins, this is most likely the procedure that will apply to you, unless you want to issue securities, and then I can refer you to completely different regulation. So first of all, you need to be a legal entity if you want to issue a token, or if you want to seek admission to admission of your token to crypto exchange. So you need to have a company or a foundation or other legal entity. Then you need to create a white paper. White paper is prescribed in the regulation. So it is exactly written there what you need to mention in the white paper. Those are things as you need to identify yourself, you need to explain what type of token are you issuing, what are the rights attached to the particular token, what is the supply of the token, what are the potential risks with your project, who is backing the project in terms of development team. And this white paper you then submit 20 days before you want to launch your offering to a competent authority in your member state. As I said, there's no need to notify all member states or all authorities in all member states. It is sufficient if you do it with one and list the number of countries that you want to sell your token, number of member states that you want to sell your token in. So you notify the competent authority. Your white paper doesn't necessarily have to be authorized. They just really look into content, whether you mentioned everything that was required by the regulation. And if that is so, you can publish your white paper and kickstart your token offering approximately 3 weeks after you submit it to the competent authority. So there are some exemptions even for a white paper if you want to do a very little offering for less than 1 million euro, or in case of airdrop, so you're giving away tokens for free, or in case you want to sell your tokens only to professional investors, and in other cases that are also outlined in the regulation. You don't need to really publish white papers, so you can skip this procedure and go on to issue your token. You have to also, in your white paper, notify people or let people know that basically that this is a very risky type of asset, that they can lose all their money, and that it is not guaranteed that you will be able to further develop the project because you are in a relatively early startup stage. So this is something that usually these warnings are attached also in crowdfunding, for instance, are attached to offerings of startup companies, because retail investors or retail, let's say, consumers might not be aware of all the ins and outs of startup financing. And you cannot make any promises of the future token value. So in many white papers, we have seen that people were promising that the value of the tokens will skyrocket, and they also in detail described how they will, let's say, manipulate the supply of a token, so that the value of the token is artificially increased. And this is obviously forbidden because there are no assumptions that you can make, especially when it comes to the price of the token on the crypto exchange, which the companies that issue token have absolutely no power over. And any sort of market manipulation related to supply of the token is also forbidden by this regulation. So there is no funky business going on with the supply just to increase the value of your token. And of course, you also have to publish the results of the offering after you close let's say the token offering itself, so that the people know whether how many tokens you sold, and how much money you were able to raise in the offering. When it comes to asset reference tokens and e-money tokens, the situation is different because they are subsumed under much more stringent regime. In contrast to the let's say general regime for the all catch category of tokens, authorization is needed for asset reference tokens and e-money tokens. And this authorization can take up to 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, if I counted correctly according to the regulation. Moreover, it doesn't end with authorization. You have a lot of requirements that you have to comply with throughout the time that these tokens are in the circulation. So you have to disclose a lot to the authorities, a lot of information about your company. You have to make sure that you have a good governance in place. You have to prove that you have qualified personnel. You have to undergo regular audits. You have to comply with minimum capital requirements. And of course, in the case of stablecoins, what is absolutely essential is that you handle your reserve properly, because that reserve is something that is backing that stable coin. So if you misuse your reserve, or you further invested into very risky assets, you may lose your reserve, and then the whole point of stable coins is basically lost. Now we can go further to who are the crypto asset service providers according to MiCA. And the regulation is directly stipulates what are crypto asset services. And these are enumerated in the regulation itself. So for instance, it's the custody and administration of crypto assets on behalf of third parties. We can think of crypto custodians, just like custodian wallet providers. Sometimes also crypto exchanges have a custody of crypto assets on behalf of the people who have account on the crypto exchange. Crypto exchanges itself, so trading platforms, is another type of crypto asset services that is stipulated in the regulation. Also, different services who facilitate the sort of the exchange of fiat currencies and crypto assets, or crypto assets for crypto assets. We have also crypto asset service providers who are placed in crypto assets, which means that they are facilitating the investment or placing of the assets with private or professional investors. So they're making sure that when you have the so-called private round of offering of your tokens, that your assets get to be placed with professional investors. And last but not least, also crypto asset advisors, so investment advisors. So what are the requirements for crypto asset service providers? Well, first of all, they all need to be authorized. They all need to be present and incorporated in European Union, one of the member states. The application process is quite extensive, usually takes approximately 4 months if everything goes smooth. And then, of course, as I mentioned, also with the issuers, then they have the ability to offer their services across European Union without necessity to register in every state. There are also other requirements, so-called prudential requirements, where the crypto asset service providers need to have a minimum capital, which is depending a little bit on the type of the service provided, and is ranging somewhere for us between 50K and 150K, of course, in euros. Or the alternative is to have extensive insurance policy, which basically probably doesn't exist yet, but I'm sure will be developed soon after the regulation comes into force. And there is a lot of other organizational requirements included in the regulation. There are requirements for qualified management, for proper IT systems and cybersecurity arrangements, which are, of course, extremely important in case of crypto assets. Also, the crypto asset service providers have to separate their own assets or their own funds from those of clients and keep it that way. They have to develop policies for detection of market abuse that is to large extent forbidden by the regulation. And they also have to have a proper record keeping. Every type of a crypto asset service has additional requirements that need to be complied with. So if you think you fall under one of those categories, you can either reach out to me or you can check it yourself what the other additional requirements are. Some crypto assets were left out of the regulation. As I mentioned before, those are financial instruments. And that is a little bit something that is maybe a little bit controversial in a sense that this regulation very much resembles a financial regulation. However, the tokenized traditional financial instruments are not part of it. So we have two quite similar routes. One that applies to crypto assets as defined by MiCA, and one that applies to traditional financial assets. But as I said, the problems that both regulations address are relatively similar. And what was also left out is so-called CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies, because this regulation doesn't apply to central banks. And basically, they're free to issue their own digital currencies if they want, and they do not. They can basically disregard MiCA because it's not applicable to them. I will just check the time slowly. We're coming to an end. So what I think are the main drawbacks of MiCA, if I have to look at it, is, and that is also, let's say, the critique that is coming from the industry, that MiCA doesn't really embrace decentralization. Because if you look at how the crypto issuers or crypto asset issuers or crypto asset service providers are defined, it is still very much focused on centralized entities. Well, you have to have a legal entity, you have to be registered, you have to be, you have sort of a liability for compliance with all these points and all these requirements that MiCA made. And what if you have a decentralized protocol where, or decentralized app, where the community really has the, or dominates the governance of that? That happens a lot in, for instance, decentralized finance. That happens also in case of decentralized crypto exchanges. But that is very difficult in those cases to really be compliant with MiCA, because MiCA does not consider that option, doesn't create any path for these sorts of applications. So that is something that maybe MiCA or regulator will have to address, whether they decide to facilitate such applications and such projects as well or not. Furthermore, when we did like the initial legal analysis, we figured out a lot of the already mentioned sub-industries like decentralized finance would be significantly hindered by MiCA, because in some cases it would fall under the definition of asset reference tokens. And in that case, that's quite stringent regime, as I mentioned, which would be not possible for most of DeFi projects to comply with. Then another big drawback is that it really focuses on stable coins, and it leaves all the rest of the tokens category a little bit unattended, or there's quite little regulation of those, which on one hand may be favorable, but some voices from the industry said there could be more attention to facilitation of the other tokens, except for outside of the scope of the stable coins. Another drawback is that even if the regulation is one for every member state has its own authorities that may interpret things differently. And for instance, just the categorization and definition of tokens, it can be interpreted differently in Spain, in France, in Italy, and applied differently in Spain, in France, and Italy. So that is something that we will have to see. And it is also very desirable that the Commission issues further guidance on how these different articles or different provisions in this regulation should be interpreted. So there is still a lot of question marks. On the other hand, I think it's generally good that we have a regulation that, as I mentioned in the beginning, legitimizes a lot of stakeholders in the industry and gives them really opportunity to grow their businesses across European Union. And once it is being applied, I think we will see whether it works well for the industry or not. So there's still time. No panic is needed. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And please don't hesitate to ask questions or reach out if you have more remarks, or if you are curious about some specifics of this new and rather exciting regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivona, for your interesting presentation. Everyone feel free to use the Q&A located at the bottom of your screen to ask your questions. Also, I want to let you know that your mics are open, so you can unmute yourself and ask directly, Ivona, if you have any questions. So we have some time until the next session.